So this is the idea that we're getting ready to try, or we're at that part in the project where people are getting to telling the technicians, okay, the developers, the interface designers, etc., precisely what to do. Okay, so where we are, got this idea that maybe we've outlined requirements and we have some notion of how the database is going to look. All the stuff we've done, how do we get that into, and concretely, what should the people do? Should be familiar with, gosh, just as any kind of business, these three approaches to getting new software, and sometimes it's a mix and match, kind of a how to acquire, making like decisions among different things, kind of like an alternatives matrix. We've already done that, but we'll see that to get a strategy. Okay, so we're moving away from what the system does to how it operates. Okay, and so it's really kind of the details that somebody who's going to do. So it's going from some vague notions from a house down to the detailed architectural plans of what to do, so a plumber knows where to run the pipe. Okay. And again, we're not going to have to do the plumber specs, but we need to appreciate that they're there. Great. So you can read this, and you've already read it, and you've lived, right? You've done some design documents and done some process and data models, and we've been there, and so you hopefully have a picture of what all that looks like now. Okay. And what happens then in design, okay? It's this detail of kind of the architecture, infrastructure, computers, where it's going to go, what software and hardware, exactly how the interface is going to work, details with the computer-aided software engineering, physical processing. We talked about process a PO. Well, now physically where, and when they take cash, do they put it in the drawer? Are we going to let iPay, check out? And that kind of thing, and revising what we've got so far. So there is it's kind of going. And so we'll be talking in this chapter primarily about alternatives, broadly speaking approaches. We'll touch on some of these, but getting into some of this detail even when we get there. It's a little bit above where we are for this course. We're more managerial and administrative oriented than, it's a database course that we do some of this kind of stuff. Okay, so just really, if you get at what we're after is kind of are we going to broadly decide how we end up going. Okay, so the kind of documentation we're going to create is now a system specification. Okay, and it has these elements, and so you can always read back in the book about it, but it gets more physical, more detailed, more focused, more to the point where somebody can take these and actually do something. So we're off the off the pot, so to speak, or off the edge of the pool and actually swimming in the water. All right, and so knowing what these guys are over the next few chapters is really the goal. All right, so we have this new system, and we know what idea for a system, and we know what we want it to do. Those are the requirements. There's three, and then you can interchange and interleave them, ways to get that. You can do the work in-house. So if it's a web page, find somebody in-house that does web pages, they build the web page, and you're done. Okay? You can buy a package system. There are lots of, for a web page templates, and possibly customize it. Yeah, but we want to tweak it, add our own logos, a couple of actions, or we can say, vendor, we want a website, make it happen. And those are, broadly speaking, the only ways to roll. Sometimes you'll do a little bit of some and a little bit of the other. Okay, but in-source it, buy something off the shelf, or buy something custom. And those are them. So now, what are the pros and cons? And so you probably get to argue this in some of the work that you have to do. And the pros are, it's exactly what you want. You maybe be able to match your processes a little bit better. It builds your skills so you can do it in the future. By building one web page, I can support it, and maybe we save a little bit of money. There's going to be cons. It is. It might not be the business that you're in. We don't have web developers. We're a dental practice, so it'd be silly to do that ourselves on a web page. We're better off with a package or outsourcing it or something. And the risks can be there just because you're defining your own ways to go. So there's some benefits and some curses. Gosh, to be able to do more than just be able to react to bullet points. Let me walk in my shoes for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, something as a system consultant, and you will see the benefits and the curses. But for talking points, the book does a pretty good job. Package software is probably where I'd recommend for line of business type applications that most people look first. A lot of you have some experience doing ERP. That's Microsoft Dynamics GP from MINF 3650, among other things. Why develop your own way to do basic accounting and procurement and sales kinds of things? People have figured these processes out. You ought to buy that in. Save your custom package for maybe those unique, value-added, strategically significant kinds of things that maybe are your competitive advantage, right? Into doing things. And so a lot of times it's more efficient. In fact, Peter Drucker, last century in the 70s, said it is far less expensive for a company to mold their processes around how packaged software suggests doing it, then that's going to be much less expensive than developing it to meet the processes as they stand. So things like the hiring cycle, unless you're really hiring unique kinds of people, figure out how Dynamics or SAP or somebody figures you ought to do it and go with that. You will be up and running much more quickly. Oh, there it is, ERP. And we will be, I'm glad they put it because we'll be spending a little time back in the ERP pool toward the end of the course. So, speccing these things is a project, and it's a project that involves business-oriented rather than technical-oriented people. That's why we're going to do some ERP work a little bit later in the term. Tech Practice 6 and 7. Just something for you to look forward to. All right, so package software, and right. I can't argue with that. You get what the package says. And so if it doesn't have the function you need, maybe you buy an add-on function, maybe you do without that function, maybe you change the way that it'll work. But many package applications do allow for customization, and you can configure it to a large extent. The same ERP runs the Varsity, as runs Atlantic Historical Society, as runs the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, 3 businesses we know, all in Atlanta, very different businesses, same ERP software. So that customization thing is part of it. Sometimes we can then develop a workaround because, so we custom develop or buy another package or a vertical to take care of this particular need that they didn't think about in the general package. That's called a workaround. Good. And so integration is doing it all, combining it all kind of together. And so, the term legacy systems, you ought to go, those are the systems that are in place. Okay, how do we integrate those with the new things? God, that is work. It's important, creative, profitable, effective, productivity raising for the organization, but sometimes that integration work is just it can be a nightmare, or thank the person that can do it well if you've got them on hand. Where we're coming from is understanding what system integration means, and so it's making my Dynamics GP hook up to our cash register system if that's what we're doing. Okay, and good. No joke. I can't argue that the book isn't saying the right things here, but how do we integrate? And that is, I can't give you an answer. Find the right expert in both, have them make a convincing case to you that they can do it, then trust them. Okay? And we should know what outsourcing means. We go entirely external, right? The provider create that. Sometimes they're ASPs, okay, sometimes they're ISPs, independent service providers in an ERP market. The term, there's SaaS, software as a service. Sometimes that's how Office 365 works, right? You're renting it, basically, rather than buying it. But those are just terms that shouldn't throw you if you run into them in some exercises, right? And outsourcing has, short setup time, maybe low cost of entry, but maybe you pay for what you get. So it's something that you just have to balance. Realize it's out there, include it in your evaluation, and on it goes. And there are some risks, right? have problems placing co-ops because, oh, we have confidential information. Okay, yeah, so they can't outsource it to our co-ops or interns. Yeah, somebody else, and this is key. I've worked as a consultant for a number of years before I got the real job here at what was then Augusta College, and man, I developed a lot of skills. And I'm looking at this. I developed a lot of skills, and then I took those skills with me when I left the project. Might have been good for some of those skills to have been in-house, right? How did this thing get configured? Boy, that's great advice, but tough to follow, right? Yeah, if you need to at least understand what a good one looks like, right? You outsource cooking a steak when you go to a restaurant, but you know what a good steak looks like when you get it. So maybe you don't understand exactly the vagaries of cooking one, but you should understand what you need, what to request, and how it keeps you moving forward. But that's sometimes one of the reasons to outsource, right, to a web developer is I don't know how to do it, but I know what a website and an effective site looks like. And yes, of course, try to get that proven track record and somebody that will work for you at a price you can stand. Nothing. And speaking about price, there's contracting arrangements and time and materials. It's probably the most advantageous on the vendor's side, the consultant, right? They just say, I put in this much time, had this many materials, or what we did, here's the bill. You probably get the most flexibility and adaptability out of them, but you need to control that because that can kind of go way, way up. And especially if they're let loose to do what they think might be done as opposed to what you're controlling. Right? And fixed price kind of is on the other thing. We'll give you X to do Y. Okay? Just think about the role that puts them. Make sure you define your X. They'll be motivated, and I've been on that thing, and we've got to pay our bills as a consultant and pay our troops and have a little profit for the practice. And if you tell me it's going to be $10,000, I will get it done, but I'm not looking at ways to increase your wow value. I'm looking at ways to keep the margin up. Okay? And this is maybe a way to have them share. If you have some good concrete way to describe, here's going to be the value that's added from that system, and we'll kick back 10%. So I don't know. We're going to save you money by speeding up your collections. Okay, great. Do percent. Some places that's illegal. A lot of accounting firms can't do that value-added type contractor. Have to be careful about how they define it. Supposedly that puts them in a bad position that could be compromised, right? Conflict of interest, right? Am I solving this problem, or am I trying to make the margin, not so much the margin look big, but the outcomes look big? All right. So if you ever are writing something or thinking, and what's great about this book is a reference are the checklists for the project team. What should we be thinking about? And so ask yourself before we outsource. Boy, do this. Best way to break down a project is cancel community, not have this going. And sometimes you just need not so much to be in their face, but ask them to come in every regularly and where are you and why, and think about where they should be, as opposed to that outsource. Now I don't have to think about that. I know it's sometimes nice to think about benign neglect, but don't do it. Absolutely know what you're asking for, and then maybe eliminate part of the fluffy requirements and go. And this isn't something they're doing for you, it's something you're doing for each other. Right. Do them carefully. And sometimes I laugh even at my own bullet points, right? Does this add any value? Would it occur to you to select the vendor, developer, or service provider without care? Right? You don't need to say it, but maybe need to be reminded. Are there other vendors? Specific focus on who's going to be doing the management. It's long-term relationships between short-term contracts. Here, turn this around, cha-ching, you're paid. Turn this around, cha-ching, you're paid. Because what you want is that long-term relationship you can count on. Okay, nothing rocket science here, and some guidelines, because it's the sort of exercises you're going to be doing, which is going to be best. All right, so the business need, a unique business need, and we got some technical experience. That's all leaning toward this guy, right? And if we have some that's not core to our business, we don't do HR, we just need HR. Okay, that's starting to look at this. Well, that's maybe even more this. The business need is common. This one is, it's not so common, but it's not a core thing. It's not how we make our money. All right, so good checklist stuff to think about, but it's more the application and the execution than it is a professor saying, oh, here's what they are. Right? And so here they take a few slides to expand that on out. If you have access to the slide deck, I'll even let you look at it, right? So what are project skills? What is project management? And so, and time frames. So all that did, and I just didn't mean to kind of click through it, but what those do is expand on that table. The table says it all. All right. And so now this acquisition strategy. Okay, how are we going to let vendors know? How are we going to discover vendors? One way to do vendor discovery, especially for a big and sometimes it's governmental projects, is do an RFP or an RFQ, request for quote, something that here's we would like everybody to bid on this. You see them in the big papers all the time, especially for big projects. And it's a nice way if you can find 2 or 3 vendors. Well, if you want to be a little bit cynical, you can play them off one against the other. Well, vendor B said they could do this for 20% less, and that kind of thing. I don't suggest you do that, but it does. Sometimes if you get 2 or 3 quotes and they're all in kind of the same ballpark, then that gives you some reasonable assurance too. This takes a little bit more work because you got to find the people to get them to respond to a particular way. You got to really know what you want up front to get that to go. But find who's going to do the work. That's right. And right, there's two variations on the idea. RFI just tell me, firm, how you think you might be able to meet these general needs for development and web resourcing. Okay, so we're not so much asking for a proposal from them. We're just saying, here are our credentials. Here's why you might hire us. And maybe if it's a very specific thing, it's a quote. We need this, and the other. Tell us how much you're going to do it. You don't even need to propose it. We've done all the gluing. We've done an alternative matrix kind of thing before. It's grid, alternatives, and weights, and it's a way to maybe collect the combined wisdom of a group. Let's kind of look at what goes on, and they've got a generic one, but we looked at this where we have this is the hard part coming up. What are the criteria that matter to us? What's the relative importance? Maybe it's a score of 100, and you can think of percentages, right? And so then there's the alternatives, and maybe something about how this alternative meets the criteria. But for us, the score was 5. They do that very well. This next one was 3. And then we've done the thing where we weight these things and we add them up, and roughly speaking, alternative 3 wins, but man, I wouldn't discount this, but they both kind of trump this, right? So, to me, it's down now between these 2. I would look again, if it's GIGO, if you're just making up numbers to plug, then the numbers don't mean anything. So kind of go back and kind of view, are these weights right? Is really criterion 4 here the most important thing? And should count for 1/4 of the effect of what's going on, or not. But it is a handy way to do some rough kinds of discriminating, and I recommend you do it. And I think we've done one already. I forget if I make you do another one on it goes. All right. So, again, I don't want to be light or glib like this information is something you already knew, but it's not a hard step to, I see in broad terms what's going on, and I see some strategies for making and doing some of this myself.